Welcome to the Pencil Bob channel. I hope you enjoy my stories. Please like and subscribe, and hit that notification icon so you never miss out. Now on with the stories.
Who would have imagined that a simple dog mishap would escalate into a full-blown battle with my HOA? Yet, here I find myself, caught in a whirlwind of accusations and demands. It all started on a day when I couldn't make it home for lunch to walk my dog like usual. I had a family member scheduled to check on him since he'd been having diarrhea, but they never showed up. When I got home from work, I found a mess. When I got home, my heart sank at the sight of my poor pup, who had clearly been struggling. He had an accident that not only left a mess on the floor, but also got all over himself, making him look utterly miserable. I rushed to clean his paws, gently wiping away the remnants of his distress. But I knew that wasn't the end of it. Unfortunately, in the chaos, he had managed to leave some watery mess on the common area carpets, a situation I never wanted to create. Once I got him bathed and feeling a little more comfortable, I turned my attention to the carpets. Armed with a variety of cleaning supplies, I dedicated the next 3 hours to deep cleaning the affected areas. I meticulously scrubbed the carpets, using a general-purpose cleaner, followed by a pet deodorizer, and finished with a neutralizing spray. It was exhausting work, but I was determined to restore the common space to its former state, all while hoping that my efforts would be recognized rather than met with blame. While I was scrubbing away, the HOA president came home and immediately started making a fuss about the smell. I get it, it wasn't pleasant, but he saw me there cleaning everything up and had to have noticed both the front and back doors were propped open to air things out. Another tenant came by during this time too and saw me hard at work. I used the same cleaning routine I learned when I worked as a professional house cleaner. Multiple passes with different cleaners and deodorizers, followed by vacuuming. When I finished, the poo was gone and the smell was neutralized. The only issue was some residual stains, but those were from years of built-up dirt getting pushed around as I cleaned. These carpets hadn't been properly cleaned in ages. A few days after the incident, just as I thought the whole ordeal was behind me, my inbox pinged with an email from the HOA president. As I read through his message, my jaw dropped in disbelief. His words were harsh and accusatory, painting a picture that seemed entirely disconnected from reality. According to him, the entire common area was still in a state of utter contamination, allegedly reeking of feces days after I had meticulously cleaned it. He went on to claim, in vivid and exaggerated detail, that there were poo stains all over the carpet, as if my dog had somehow managed to cover every square inch of the flooring. The president's language grew increasingly dramatic as the email continued, culminating in him labeling the entire area a biohazard. This seemed like an absurd overreaction, especially considering the thorough cleaning I had done. But the real kicker came at the end of the email. Not only was I being blamed for this supposed ongoing issue, but the president declared that I needed to foot the bill for professional carpet cleaning for the entire building. Not just the area where the accident occurred, mind you, but every carpeted common space in the complex. The demand seemed outrageous and completely disproportionate to what had actually transpired. As I sat there, rereading the email in stunned silence, I couldn't help but feel that there was more to this situation than met the eye. The president's overblown reaction and unreasonable demands hinted at an ulterior motive, one that I was determined to uncover. I was floored. Several other residents had told me they couldn't smell anything, and the stains were clearly just from general uncleanliness. I hadn't even been involved in this decision. They just decided I was responsible without talking to me at all. The entire situation felt incredibly suspicious. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was an ulterior motive behind the HOA president's dramatic accusations and demands. I knew for a fact that he was trying to sell his unit, and it was no secret that the building's common areas had been neglected for years. The carpets were just one example of the general disrepair that had been allowed to accumulate over time. It seemed highly convenient that, all of a sudden, the president was so concerned about the cleanliness and condition of the common areas, especially given his impending sale. The more I thought about it, the more it seemed like he was using my dog's unfortunate accident as a scapegoat to justify a long-overdue professional cleaning, one that would undoubtedly make his unit more attractive to potential buyers. By shifting the blame and financial responsibility onto me, he could avoid the cost himself and potentially expedite his sale. The whole scenario reeked of manipulation and self-interest, and I was determined not to be taken advantage of in this underhanded scheme. I decided to fight back. I talked to some of the other tenants and got 3 of them to agree to put in writing that there was no lingering smell and that the stains couldn't be blamed solely on me given the carpet's poor condition. The following afternoon, as I was returning from walking my dog, I encountered the HOA president in the lobby. His eyes narrowed as soon as he saw me, and I could tell from his body language that he was gearing up for a confrontation. Without so much as a greeting, he immediately launched into a lengthy and condescending lecture about responsibility, cleanliness, and the importance of maintaining community standards. His voice echoed off the lobby walls, drawing curious glances from a couple of other residents who were collecting their mail. Trying to maintain my composure, I took a deep breath and attempted to interject. "Look," I said, consciously working to keep my voice level and reasonable, "I understand you're concerned about the building's cleanliness. I really do. But I want to assure you that I cleaned that carpet thoroughly and meticulously. It wasn't a quick once-over. I spent hours making sure every trace of the accident was gone. Multiple people have confirmed to me that there's no lingering smell. I've been very diligent about this." The president's face contorted into a dismissive sneer. He scoffed loudly, the sound dripping with derision. "That's not what I've heard," he retorted, his voice rising. "I've had numerous complaints about the odor. And those stains? They're absolutely disgusting. They're clearly from your dog's accident. Don't try to deny it." His finger jabbed the air between us accusatorily, and I could see a vein pulsing in his forehead. The other residents in the lobby were now openly staring, clearly uncomfortable with the escalating tension. I opened my mouth to respond, to point out that the stains he was referring to had been there long before my dog's accident, but the president wasn't interested in hearing my side. He continued his tirade, his voice growing louder and more aggressive with each word. It was clear that this confrontation wasn't about finding a solution. It was about asserting his authority and making an example of me. As he ranted, I couldn't help but notice the gleam of satisfaction in his eyes, as if he was relishing this opportunity to flex his HOA muscles. The whole scene felt surreal, like I was trapped in some bizarre power play that had very little to do with actual cleanliness concerns. "Those stains have been there for months, if not years," I countered. "When was the last time the carpets were professionally cleaned?" He waved his hand dismissively. "That's irrelevant. Your dog made a mess, and now you need to fix it." "I did fix it," I insisted. "I spent hours cleaning it myself. If you want the whole building's carpets cleaned, that should come out of our HOA dues. We all use the common areas." His face flushed a deep shade of red, a clear indicator of his rising anger. The tension in the air thickened as he leaned in closer, his voice lowering to a menacing tone. "This isn't up for debate," he declared, his words dripping with authority. "You will be receiving a bill for the cleaning, and if you don't pay it, we'll pursue legal action." The finality of his statement hung heavily in the air, leaving no room for negotiation or discussion. I felt a surge of frustration and disbelief wash over me. How could he be so brazen, so willing to escalate matters to threats of legal repercussions over what had begun as a simple accident? It was as if he was using the power of the HOA to intimidate me into submission, leveraging my situation to assert his dominance. The thought of facing legal action over a dog mishap felt absurd, yet here I was, staring down a man who seemed all too eager to wield that power. I could feel my heart racing, a mix of anger and determination bubbling up inside me. This was not just about the carpets anymore. It was about standing my ground against an unjust attack. I took a deep breath. I have multiple witnesses willing to state there's no lingering odor or new stains. I'm happy to have the specific area my dog affected cleaned again, but I won't pay for the entire building. That's not reasonable. He glared at me. We'll see about that. Don't be surprised if you start getting complaints from your neighbors about the smell. As he stormed off, I couldn't help but feel this was far from over. I knew I was in the right, but dealing with a power-tripping HOA president wasn't going to be easy. I headed back to my unit, already dreading the next encounter and wondering how this would all play out. Over the next few weeks, the situation only escalated. The HOA president seemed to be on a mission to make my life difficult. He started sending out daily emails to all residents about maintaining cleanliness in common areas and reporting any unpleasant odors. It was clear he was trying to rally support against me. I noticed him lurking in the hallways more often, especially when I was taking my dog out for walks. He'd make a show of sniffing the air dramatically and wrinkling his nose, even though there was nothing to smell. A few times, he cornered me to lecture about resident responsibilities and the importance of community standards. One evening, as I was coming home from work, I found a notice taped to my door. It was an official-looking document stating that I was in violation of several HOA bylaws and that I had 30 days to pay for professional cleaning of all common area carpets or face fines and possible legal action. Frustrated, I decided to attend the next HOA meeting to address this issue head-on. When I arrived, the room was tense. The HOA president sat at the head of the table, looking smug. As soon as the meeting started, he brought up the ongoing sanitation issue. As you all know, the HOA president began, his voice carrying a tone of exaggerated exasperation. We've had a serious problem with one resident's pet causing damage to our common areas. Despite multiple warnings, the issue persists. His eyes scanned the room, pausing briefly on each face as if to underscore the gravity of the situation. The way he framed it, you'd think my dog had been on a rampage, systematically destroying the building. The president's words were carefully chosen to paint a picture of ongoing negligence and disregard for community standards, conveniently ignoring the fact that I had received no such warnings and had taken immediate action to clean up the mess. His dramatic presentation was clearly designed to sway the other residents, to rally them against me by portraying me as a repeat offender who had been blatantly ignoring the rules. As I listened to his speech, I felt a mix of frustration and disbelief. The reality of the situation was being twisted beyond recognition, and I knew I had to speak up to set the record straight. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Excuse me," I interrupted, "but that's not true at all. I cleaned up the accident thoroughly, and there have been no further incidents." The president glared at me. "Several residents have complained about the lingering odor and stains. We can't have our buildings smelling like a kennel." I looked around the room, but most people avoided eye contact. I wondered if he had been pressuring others to back up his claims. "I have statements from 3 residents confirming there's no smell," I countered. "And the stains you're referring to have been there for years due to lack of regular cleaning." The president's face reddened. "Are you accusing the board of neglect?" "I'm stating a fact," I replied. "When was the last time the carpets were professionally cleaned? It seems convenient that you're pushing for this now when you're trying to sell your unit." A murmur went through the room. The president sputtered, clearly caught off guard by my directness. That's irrelevant," he stammered. "The point is, you're responsible for this mess and you need to pay for the cleaning." I stood my ground. "I'm willing to have the specific area affected cleaned again, but I won't pay for the entire building." "That's not fair or reasonable." The meeting devolved into a heated argument, with the president growing increasingly agitated. Other residents started chiming in, some supporting me and others backing the president. It was clear the community was divided. As the meeting ended without resolution, I knew this battle was far from over. The HOA president shot me a venomous look as I left, and I couldn't help but wonder what his next move would be. I was determined to stand my ground, but I also knew I was in for a long and potentially costly fight. The following days were tense. I noticed more residents giving me odd looks in the hallways, and there seemed to be an increase in random inspections of the common areas. The HOA president was clearly trying to build a case against me, but I wasn't going to back down. I started documenting everything, taking photos of the carpets, keeping a log of my interactions with the HOA president and other residents, and saving all email communications. I even set up a small camera outside my door to catch any potential harassment. The situation was taking a toll on me. I found myself constantly stressed, always on edge whenever I left my unit. My dog seemed to pick up on my anxiety, becoming more nervous on our walks. It felt like we were both prisoners in our own home. As weeks passed, the pressure continued to mount. The HOA president started implementing new pet policies that seemed specifically designed to target me. There were new restrictions on when pets could be in common areas and additional fees for pet owners. I reached out to a lawyer friend for advice, and she suggested I start gathering more support from other residents. I began talking to my neighbors more, explaining my side of the story and asking for their backing. Many were sympathetic, having had their own run-ins with the overzealous HOA president. The breaking point came when I received another notice, this time threatening to put a lien on my property if I didn't comply with their demands. I knew I had to take more drastic action. I called for an emergency HOA meeting, determined to address this issue once and for all. As residents filed into the community room, the tension was palpable. The HOA president sat at the front, looking both annoyed and smug. When it was my turn to speak, I laid out everything: the original incident, my thorough cleaning, the lack of evidence for ongoing issues, and the president's increasingly hostile behavior. I presented statements from supportive neighbors and photos documenting the carpet's long-standing poor condition. This isn't about cleanliness or community standards, I concluded. This is about using HOA power for personal gain and harassment. I'm not the only one who's been targeted, just the latest victim. The room erupted into discussion. Other residents began sharing their own stories of run-ins with the HOA president. It became clear that many were fed up with his heavy-handed approach and questionable motives. As the meeting wore on, no clear resolution was reached. The HOA president continued to insist on his version of events, but it was obvious he had lost the support of many residents. We adjourned with promises to revisit the issue and potentially reassess the HOA leadership. Walking back to my unit that night, I felt a mix of exhaustion and cautious optimism. The fight wasn't over, but for the first time in weeks, I felt like I wasn't alone in this battle. Whatever came next, I was ready to face it head-on. This HOA sounds like a nightmare. It's absurd that they're trying to pin the cost of cleaning the entire building's carpets on you over a single incident with your dog. Clearly, the carpets were already in terrible shape from years of neglect. And now they're using you as a scapegoat to cover up their own lack of maintenance. The president's behavior is especially shady, given he's trying to sell his unit. It's obvious he's trying to make the place look better at your expense. Total abuse of power. The HOA president's actions are a blatant abuse of authority. Labeling the area a biohazard and demanding you pay for professional cleaning of the entire building is over the top and completely unreasonable. This is clearly a ploy to offload the cost of long overdue maintenance onto you. The fact that he didn't even involve you in the discussion before deciding you were responsible is a huge red flag. It sounds like he's using his position to bully residents into footing the bill for improvements that should have been taken care of by the HOA long ago. It's especially suspicious given that he's trying to sell his unit. This kind of behavior is why so many people have issues with HOAs. They're supposed to serve the community, not exploit it for personal gain. This story is infuriating. The HOA president's behavior is nothing short of tyrannical. First, he blows the situation completely out of proportion by labeling the area a biohazard and insisting that the entire building's carpets need professional cleaning. This is despite the fact that multiple residents have confirmed there's no lingering smell and that the stains are from years of neglect, not your dog's accident. It's clear he's using this incident as an excuse to force you to pay for overdue maintenance that the HOA should have been handling all along. The fact that he's trying to sell his unit adds another layer of deceit. He's clearly trying to spruce up the place on your dime to make his property more appealing to buyers. And the way he handled the situation, with threats of legal action and no attempt at a reasonable discussion, is just appalling. This isn't about maintaining community standards. It's about abusing power for personal gain. It's stories like this that make people dread dealing with HOAs. They should be held accountable for their actions, not allowed to bully residents into unfair and unjust demands.
I would like to thank you for watching the video to the end. To encourage us to make more videos, please like, subscribe, comment, as well as share. Check out this other video if you haven't already.